Hey everyone, it's Andy with the Reverb Tone Report. Today I'm going to be tackling a subject that I've been wanting to do a long time. I even dug up my DIY Leslie made with used pinball machine parts. It's the history of the Leslie speaker and how that influenced the rotary speaker pedals you see today. So here's a little history lesson. The origins of this ingenious design goes back to Don Leslie in the late 30s, who wanted a way to recreate the gigantic space-filling sound of a pipe or cathedral organ. His idea was to take a spinning drum or rotor with a scoop that throws the sound around the room by aid of a motor and pulley system. To accommodate the huge range of an organ, an upper compression driver goes through a crossover and throws only treble frequencies out of a spinning horn. After Don founded Electro Music in 1941, the Leslie cabinet was released and began to win over players in the jazz and R&B scenes like Jimmy Smith, Booker T, and Shirley Scott. Models like the 122 have two speeds that are controlled by a common half-moon switch that organ players can sometimes be seen holding on to dearly and skillfully changing from fast to slow and hanging in between those two speeds to create tension and release. But this early modulation device wouldn't find its way into popular guitar music until the mid-60s, just as CBS, who owned Fender at the time, purchased the company from Leslie. The Beatles have some of the finest early examples of guitar and vocals running through a Leslie speaker, such as Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Something, Let It Be, and Blue Jay Way. However, one of the earliest examples has to be back in 1965, where a young Buddy Guy plugged his guitar into a Leslie speaker on the Junior Wells tune Hoodoo Man Blues. By the 70s, Fender has obviously seen the need to produce a more road-friendly Leslie, and so the Fender Vibratone is created. This single 10-inch speaker has a lightweight styrofoam rotor in front of it, and instead of any complicated connections, a guitar amp is used to power it, while a foot switch gives you slow and fast speeds. Listen to Stevie Ray Vaughan's Cold Shot for a classic example of the Vibratone. I'll show you some close-ups of how this Leslie is working, which is similar to a 122 with a lower bass rotor and the upper tweeter, which is using a different kind of speaker, more like something you'd see in a loudspeaker because it's a compression driver. Now, I just wanted to show you a couple of parts I used to put this one together. This is a spare motor, and it's actually a stacked motor. If you look at it, you see the slow motor, which is actually the bigger one, and the fast motor, which is just below it. Now, when you activate the lower motor with a relay via a foot switch, or a Hammond player would use that half-moon switch, and there's all sorts of friction, and that actually gives you that acceleration time that you always see in the modern pedals. And this is just all mechanical. It's done with gravity and physics. So that's one of the pluses of pedals, is that you have all these parameters to tweak that you can't do on an actual Leslie speaker. So that's a little bit about the Leslie speaker. Let's wheel this beast out of here, and I'll show you some examples of how this sound incorporated into effects pedals from the late 60s onward. Thankfully, there have been Leslie simulator pedals since the late 60s if you count the Univibe. But really, it didn't take till the 90s till you saw some really dedicated units that really got close and gave you all the features of a real Leslie, such as acceleration time and the rotor balance. One of my favorites from that late 90s era is this Korg G4 rotary speaker simulator. Also paving the way for rotary pedals in the late 90s was Hughes and Kettner with their Rotosphere, which didn't have all the fancy parameters, but it did have a real tube preamp inside to mimic the overdrive a Hammond and Leslie combo were capable of. Soon after, Boss came out with something really revolutionary and very high quality as well with the RT20. In the Rotary Ensemble, Boss used their COSM technology to model their favorite Leslie 122 cabinet, and not just the characteristics of the rotors, but also the resonance of the cab. You get some different modes with different levels of mic placement, and also one that is really cool because it throws in a Marshall to get some overdrive, just like those classic Deep Purple tones. A couple things you might want to take note on this model is that it gives you a direct signal mix, which is really helpful because a lot of those famous Leslie sounds are mixed in the studio, and you're not just hearing the pure Leslie sound. And, for instance, Peter Frampton in his live rig, he always had Marshalls and a Leslie on stage, and you could sort of get the same effect with that dry blend in there. Also, something that I think personally is really important in a Leslie simulator is a built-in overdrive circuit, just like you saw in the foot-switchable Korg G4 or here with the knob on the Rotary Ensemble. It really helps embellish that Doppler effect and just add some overtones, especially to that upper horn. After that RT20 came out, it seemed like you saw a ton of rotary speaker simulators come out, and I think a lot of that is because the technology was ready. The first Neo ventilator with its larger format and a lot of great features to tweak, the Strymon Lex, the Tech 21 Rotochoir, and Electro Harmonix' Lester G for guitar and K for keyboards. Now it seems we're in the golden age of modulation effects, and I'm not complaining. We have things like the Terraform from Wampler, the GFI Synesthesia, which has a new updated algorithm to include their own rotary speaker simulator, Neo Instruments Mini-Vent and now Micro-Vent, and there are great lower budget offerings like the Electro Harmonix Mod 11. You could also use something like a chorus or double up a chorus and a phaser, since the Leslie sound sort of is a dual modulation effect. If you just have a couple modulation pedals lying around, experiment with both of those at different settings and change their order as well. Well, there's your crash course in rotary effects, from the actual spinning speaker to the compact multi-mode modulators we have today. I hope this helped you in your search for a rotary speaker effect. Just remember to ask yourself what kind of options you need. Does it have to be stereo? Do you need all that tweakability? Or can you just get by with something like that EHX we heard, which sounded awesome? Be sure to leave some comments below on your favorite rotary speaker simulator, and I'll see you next time.